Today we are privileged to have Brian. Brian, if you on LinkedIn, he is one of the Power BI experts and one of the people who have a good community engagement, answering all the complex Power Query issues and problems. His areas of expertise is Power BI development, corporate training, and data analytics. You can follow him on LinkedIn. I'll send this social media on the chat. So the topic of today is the 5 steps of solving complex problems in Power Query. So welcome, Julius, Brian, and you can introduce yourself if there's something I didn't say, and then we can start for the sake of respecting the people who have joined
Thanks,
as we
Christopher.
wait for
And
others. Yeah.
I really, really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And, I really want to thank you for, not just the invitation here, but the challenges that you do every week. And, a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is really, really comes out of the learning that I've done through the course of your challenges and the ones that VJ Verma has been doing for the last couple of years, an Excel BI that Oz Soleil does weekly, and that Omid has been doing probably in the last 6 months or so. And so there's kind of this group of four that is really, I think, kind of elevating M in Power Query, to a level of um, participation and excitement that I have not seen. It was funny when I started writing on LinkedIn about 3 years ago, and when I used to write about M, my my the popularity of those posts would go like through the floor. That those were my least popular posts every week. And I still kept at it because I felt like there's going to come a time when M and Power Query is going to catch fire. And, I really think that the work that you've been doing and that the other three have been doing, and, some other great people in the community, Melissa DeCorte and Chandeep and Owen Price and a number of other folks, Rick DeGroot, who've been really out there kind of promoting Power Query and M. And I think to me, it is the best part of both Power BI and Excel, that it is not just kind of a tool for data cleaning and data modeling and automation, but I think as you'll see today, I treat it as kind of a home base for my entire advanced analytic work. And it's a it's an approach that I really have taken from two people. From Luca Zavarella, and this book is kind of the Bible for me for analytics in Power BI and Power Query. And what it really taught me was that you could extend Power Query far, far beyond what most people do with it. And there's another guy named Art Tenick, and Art is a good friend of Luca's and is the technical reviewer on his books. And Art has kind of got the same approach that he uses he uses Power Query in this incredibly imaginative, creative way to do all sorts of things you would never think of being done in Power Query. So what I really wanted to show today was, kind of my process for using Power Query as kind of the shell for everything I do analytically. And let me share screen here. And this is going to be an interesting experiment for me because this is there's a lot of material. I've got I've been putting this together for days now, and this is the first time I've ever presented this comprehensively. So it's going to be a little bit of an interesting experiment. I've got a lot of material, a lot of jumping around, but I hope it'll all make sense in kind of a unified way. And I want to share my screen here and just kind of talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. Um, Let me see if you can. Okay, is everybody seeing that on screen?
Yeah, I can see. Maybe I should stop sharing, but I think I stopped sharing because what I can see
Uh,
is what I was. Oh yeah, I can see your.
okay, so that should just be a cover slide. And so the
Okay.
next one, okay, so let me just jump, and I'm not gonna PowerPoint you to death today, but I do have a few slides I want to run through first. And are you seeing one called 5 Key Steps?
Yes, I can see.
Okay. And this is what I want to focus on today. And the way I think, well, I'm sorry, I'm just having a little bit of problem with PowerPoint here. Um, oh, hang on just one sec. Worried about this. Sorry, PowerPoint's been giving me a little trouble lately. Let me just see if I can get this restarted. There we go. Um, shoot. Okay. So, so there are 5 steps, and what I've got here is master the end and start positions. And um, this is this is something that as I was growing up and kind of for much of my life, I've been a bridge player. And one of the things I've learned is there's a huge parallel between kind of solving bridge problems and solving analytic problems, particularly in Power Query. And so I wanted to show you kind of the way I think about kind of how to go about solving these, kind of starting from the ends and working to the middle. The next thing about it is called Tell It to the Duck. And I don't know if you can see my camera, but that the idea of rubber duck debugging is something I'm going to talk about, and kind of the importance of talking through your solution in a pseudocode way first, before you ever dive into Power Query. And then divide and assign is really, this is where the extension of Power Query comes in. And it's the way in which we take and use Power Query as kind of the routing to M code, to Python, to R, to APIs, um, out to ChatGPT, out to Claude, out to the external file system, and then back into Power Query. Well, and then what I have here is engage the Kaiju. This is my AI step. And I'm going to talk about kind of what I've built in terms of kind of these 5 monster GPTs that kind of guide my AI work, and kind of how you can replicate that and really elevate the way you use AI, both in general and specifically with regard to Power Query. And then look inside the machine are some things I've learned in terms of the way you can work with Power Query to make it much more transparent and much more direct in kind of being able to see exactly what it's doing and kind of debug as you go. And these are some tricks that, I love Power Query in terms of the ability to look at the steps along the side, but there are ways to delve even further kind of into the machinery of what's going on that I'll show you, that to me make it the easiest way to kind of code and debug of any platform that I work on. So those are the main steps that I'm going to talk about. And I do want to just kind of talk. I don't know if there are any card players or bridge players in the crowd, but one of the things that I learned from playing competitive bridge is that you want to start from the end position. That if you look at a hand, or you look at a technique with all 52 cards, it becomes very, very difficult. Very few people, even among the top players, can process 52 cards at once. And so what you do is you learn to kind of reduce things down to the end position. And this is a very advanced position, but the fact that it only has 5 cards makes it, or 4 cards, makes it much simpler to break down. And this is exactly the approach that I take for Power Query, is that if you oftentimes if you look at a problem and you look at the problem and then kind of where you need to go, it seems like a long distance. It seems like a tough problem. But if you take and you work backward from the solution, kind of in the sense of reducing the problem down to those last few cards. So in this case, this is one that Crispo had a couple of weeks ago. And what I did here, and actually, he actually gives you a hint right here. It says split and pivot the orders table. And so what you know is kind of the penultimate position here, the step right before you get to the solution, is this pre-pivot position. And this, in a sense, is that kind of final card position, in that this is what you want to get to. And so when you have the end solution in mind, it makes it a lot easier to get to that point. And then once you've got here, this then becomes kind of a very straightforward, simple pivot. And so often what I do is, I kind of start from the end and figure, okay, what is the penultimate step or 2 steps from the penultimate step look like? And then that gives me a picture in my mind of where do I want to get from the start. And so, in bridge, you play 52 cards, but there are literally dozens of books written about the opening play, the first card played. There's well over 2,000 pages represented here, written about just the first card played. And that is really, really similar to the way M-code works, in that if you want to kind of see the direction a solution is taking, you want to look to the first move that somebody makes. And the interesting thing about when you look at the challenges that Crispo runs, or that VJ runs, is that the problems are really beautifully designed and laid out, and they're always kind of have a particular intent of something they want to teach. But the interesting thing is everybody approaches them different. And one of the things that I find fascinating about these is looking at the approaches that everybody else takes. And that I wanted to show in terms of a couple of examples. But before I do, what I've done is I've kind of, and I'll provide a copy of these slides, but I've broken down kind of the most common opening moves in terms of going from one structure to another. And in most cases, for challenges, you'll start with a table, and then you'll move into a different structure. You go from a table to a different kind of table, a table to a record, table to a list. And then sometimes you'll go, from a list to a record to a value to a table. And being able to kind of move back and forth and kind of envision what these transformations look like, particularly the first one, is really key to getting down the road and kind of being able to work from the ends to the middle. And I'll show you a couple of examples that here we go. Opening moves. So so this is a challenge. This is a challenge that that VJ had put out a while ago. And let me pull up the. So this was. Let me blow this up a little bit. This is a really difficult challenge, and we don't really have time to get into the details of this, but this was one of those ones where you had to kind of take a table that was fairly complex, and then transform it into another version using a kind of a whole set of rules about how to distribute these names across these fields. And it ended up being, I think, one of the more difficult problems he's provided. And so the interesting thing is, as I went through the solutions on this, was looking at the different ways people had approached this. And I pulled up a couple of a couple of examples. So there are a few people who participate really regularly, and I pulled a couple of their solutions out. And so what Luan did here is he kind of started off with a complex add column. I started off with a table of records, and you can see here that it took the source table and then moved that to a list of records. And by clicking in here, you can see, kind of the structure of each record. Zoran, he did a table of rows, and that reduced to a list of lists. Alejandro did a group by, and that reduces to a table of tables. Bo did transform rows into a record list. And then Rick did an unpivot. And so this to me is fascinating in the sense that you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 or 7 experts, all of whom took totally different approaches. And if you look at kind of the structure of each of our tables, they're very, very different. You've got Rick's as an unpivoted table. You've got a list of lists. You've got a table of tables. You've got a different list of lists, a list of records. And so I think part of the skill in this and part of the training is really to begin to recognize and develop a mental picture of kind of what these transformations do. And there was a post I did a couple of weeks ago that was disassembling tables in MCode. And what I did with this one was something very, very similar. Is I took a table which was just the world records in track and field, and took this raw data and then just transformed it using a number of those common transformations, just to kind of give a picture of what each of these is doing. And this is something that if you want to become good at M and good at Power Query, to me, this is one of the first things to do, is just start taking tables and transforming them using these common transformations until you get really familiar with what each of these are doing, kind of what they look like. Because once you know this, what you can do is kind of take that beginning and end position and begin to visualize, okay, what's the twisting and turning and reorganizing of the information that I'm going to need to do in order to get from that start position to the end position. So that's the first one. So the next one that we'll go to is, first of all, before I go any further, are there any questions, that I want to just, kind of be open throughout the presentation to, I don't want to just talk at you for an hour. So if there are questions or, comments, or, you've got kind of a different take on this, feel free to jump in and provide that. I can't, unfortunately, when I've got the screen up, I can't see you. So, Crispo, if there are any, questions,
no,
definitely
there's
break in,
none
let
in
me
the
know.
chat. Yeah, there's none in the chat, and you can raise your hand, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. So
Can you all hear me okay?
yes, I can. We can hear you.
All right. Now, I want to move to the second point. And okay, so hold on just one sec. Um, okay, so here we go. So let me just real quick, let me just jump out, stop sharing for a minute. Just wanted to make sure everybody can hear me. Chris, everything all good?
Yeah, everything is okay.
I'm not hearing you.
You can't hear me?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't gotten any questions. And so okay, let me jump back into sharing. We're all good. And entire screen. Okay. So now we're back. We're back here, and the next thing we're going to talk about is what I call talk to the duck. And I want to take the problem that Crispin posted last night and use that as kind of our discussion point here. We can actually solve this one in real time. And the talk to the duck is kind of a combination of two things. One of which is it's a technique called pseudo-coding. And what pseudo-coding is basically taking plain language and building a solution based on plain language steps. And the second part of this is what's called rubber ducking and rubber duck debugging. And it's a technique where you talk through your solution, often to a rubber duck like this or like the one on screen. And what that does is it forces you to vocalize your thought process. And in doing so, it's often really helpful as a way to kind of work out problems in your code. It kind of makes you see inconsistencies. It makes you see omitted steps. And so what I like to do for these complex problems is, and sometimes even not particularly complex problems, is to first work through, and oftentimes either vocally or in writing. And what I've done here with the problem from last night is I've gone through and put together kind of what my pseudocode would look like for this. So, in looking at this problem, what we have to do is we have to go from this and then highlight the customers that are repeated for a given date. And so as I thought through this, I thought, okay, the first thing I want to do is I want to reorder these columns. I want to put date first. Then I want to split this customers into rows. So I want to split by the semicolon, split that into rows. Then I want to group by date and customer, and then count the rows in each group. And so for those customers that have repeats in a given date, they're going to have 2 rows or more. And so then what we want to do is take out the customers that only have 1 row. And then for the remaining customers, then they're going to be on multiple lines. And so we want to somehow paste those together on one line like we have here. And then we want to do just kind of some cleanup. And so that's kind of the way I think through these. This pseudocoding doesn't have to be perfect in any way, but it provides you kind of a mental roadmap to work from. And the nice thing about this is it lets you do a few things. Is it, if you're not really familiar with M code, it kind of gives you some keywords to use to kind of provide hints as to where to go next. And one of the things I want to show you is, if you're not familiar with this, this is to my mind like the greatest Power Query resource that exists out here, and that is something that Rick de Groot has developed called Power Query How. And this is kind of the documentation I think Microsoft wishes they could develop, in that Rick has gone through and has done an incredible job of organizing every type of function, constant, enumerator, operator, error message, anything you can imagine. And what he's done, particularly if you go here to functions, and one of the things I love about MCode is if you don't know what function to use, you can oftentimes just, unlike DAX, where you've got these very kind of ambiguous, kind of confusing, like calculate doesn't actually calculate anything. It changes context. Whereas in M code, if you look, like it'll say, okay, text dot combine. If you're trying to combine text, text strings, and it's just text dot combine. If you want to do, you want to group a table, table dot group. And it's right there. So oftentimes what you can do is through that pseudo-coding, just in kind of plain language, you can find those keywords that then will kind of guide you to the information you need. And so what I want to do is I just want to kind of show, in working through that problem from last night, kind of how this works. And so what I've got, let's see, I've got, let me put that pseudocode up on screen if I can. Here we go. And let's see if we can put that over in a window. And then let's put Power Query over in another window. Okay, and let's see if we can kind of use this pseudocode as a guide. And so what we've got here is, the first thing we do is reorder. So we take the source file and we just slide that over. So the next thing we want to do is we want to split customers to rows. And so we can take this and say split column by delimiter. And we're going to use semicolon. And then I don't know why Microsoft kind of buries what I think is one of the best features in Power Query under this advanced options, but the split to rows is incredibly useful because it's dynamic. You don't have to know how many rows how many columns you're splitting to. You can split to rows and then unpivot or group. And so we've now got this kind of all spread out. And then what we want to do, and this is where you'll sometimes find in the pseudocoding, you don't always think of everything, and that's okay, because what we've got here is we've got it broken out the way we'd envisioned. But what I didn't take into account is that when we split, some of these are going to have spaces, and that's going to cause problems. And so what we want to do is we want to take and we want to trim this. So transform and then trim to take those spaces out, because that will now give us the proper counts. And so if we take and we take these two columns, and then following our pseudocode, we do a group by, and then we do a count. And so what we've got now is we've got some with 2 and some with 1. So now, given that we want only the repeateds, what we're going to do is we're going to filter out the ones. And this is now what we want, which is if we look back to the solution here, we've got Carl, Ralph and Joy, and Brad. And so the only thing we're missing here is we've got these two on different lines. So what we can do is we can take this column out now, since we don't need this. And now the only thing we need to do is get somehow those two customers here together on one line. And that's something we thought about in our pseudocode, but we didn't really include a method to do it. So this is now where you kind of have to kind of backtrack a little and say, okay, how am I gonna combine these? And what we can do is we can do a second group. And so we can group here, group by date. And instead of count, we'll just do all here. And this is going to be the one place where we're not going to be able to use the user interface exactly. And this is one of the things I like about Power Query is you don't have to jump immediately into free coding with them. What you can do is oftentimes just by kind of some simple editing in the user interface. So right here, what this is let me expand this briefly so we can see the whole thing. This is a fairly looks complex, but it's actually not, in the sense that this whole portion is not really necessary. So we can take this out, and all this is doing is saying, okay, we're going to take this previous step and we're just going to group by date each table. And so now, instead of table, what we want to do is we just want to turn that into a list, because all we care about from that table is the customers. And if we do that, we'll see this turns into a list. And then all we have to do is just extract and then custom, because we want to do not just a semicolon, but a semicolon space. And we hit OK. And there's our solution. So if we look at this and then we look back to the solution here, it's exactly what we were asked for. So I think that's a good example of where the pseudocoding just provides us a roadmap. It's not a perfect roadmap, but it's a really good starting point. And so now what I want to do is I want to jump into what I call divide and assign. And this is where it really gets interesting. And I'm going to show you with this the most powerful function call in all of Power BI and Power Query. And it's not going to look like much when you first see it, but what we're going to do here is we're going to go to transform, and we're going to say run an R script. And I've used R for 10 years. I'm just learning Python. So I know most of you are probably Python users, if you've picked one or the other. I'm going to show you in R. The techniques I'm going to show you today in R work almost identically in Python. A little bit different syntax, but the key here is that when you call this R script, what it says here is data set holds the input for this script. And the magic word in Power Query is data set. And what this does is, in this script, it takes the last result, the table that is the final result before you call the script, and it calls that table data set. So if what we do here is we just say, okay, I want to create a data frame, and into that I want to feed data set. And then what I want to do is I want to take and I want to just add a column to that data frame called message. And we're going to make the message hello from R. And then we're just going to call that data frame. And that's our R script. And so watch this. When we hit this, it'll run for a little bit. And now what we get is we've gone from extract values into our R script and then out to data frame. And what it's done is it's added the column with hello from R. And while that might not seem that amazing, okay, we just added a constant in a column. What that gives you the power to do is to take any table and do anything with it. And by anything, I mean anything. So let me show you a website called CRAN. And CRAN is the repository that R uses for all of its functions. And so let me just real quickly fire up my Stream Deck, and I'll find the CRAN. Here we go. Okay, so this is what's called MetaCRAN, and this is kind of the statistics on CRAN. And what you see here is R works according to packages. So it's like libraries in Python. And so what you can see here is there are 21,145 active libraries in R. And people talk about kind of how Python is, kind of taking over from R and what's the future of R. Take a look at this. 33 million, almost 400,000 packages downloaded last week. Okay, that is not the sign of a program that is going anywhere anytime soon. And it shows you kind of the flexibility and the functionality that you now have within Power Query. You've now got 21,000 packages that can do basically anything analytical you can imagine, you can now do within Power Query. And I want to show you kind of how this works. And that basically what you can do is, if you let's say you need to factor prime numbers. So you can actually go in, and what I often do is I will go into Perplexity. That I like Perplexity. You can use ChatGPT. Whatever your AI of choice is, and you can say, what is the best R package for factoring prime numbers? And it'll just do kind of a quick search. And as is often the case, no matter what you ask it, it will tell you, okay, there's the numbers package, there's the prime package, there's prime factors package. So there will often be 4, 5, 6 different packages. And so this is recommending the numbers package. And so then what you can do is you can go to MetaCRAN and you can search for the numbers package, and it's right here. And so you can look at this, and then one of the things that I really love about R is it's got a standard format for every package. So every package looks exactly the same in terms of the structure of the documentation. So you click on the manual and they'll all look like this. And then you can go through and basically jump to whatever function it is you need and learn what the syntax of that function is for what you need to do in R within Power Query. And so I want to show you something I built fairly recently. And this is using, this was something I built for regex. And so, for those of you who use regex, recently it was just added to Excel. I wish they would put it into native Power Query, but currently it's not. So what you have to do if you want to use regex is you have to call it from within Power Query using Python or using R. And so if we go here into transform, Um, oh, okay. So what we want to do is go. Uh, okay. So let me just show you real quick. So here's the raw data, and it's a bunch of big long strings of text and numbers. And what we want to do is we want to parse out of that um, particular things. And so let's say in this case we want three numbers followed by a capital letter. And now what we can do is if we go to data, three numbers followed by a capital letter. And so what it's doing, and then just to show you, we can say, okay, let's change this up. We can say um, two numbers followed by two lowercase letters. And if we then look at our data, what we'll see is two numbers followed by two lowercase letters. And so this is fully dynamic. It's basically in real time. What it's doing is it's taking our source data, it's taking this regex request. So it's taking the parameter from what I typed in. It's then taking that and sending that, actually, let me go back up here. If we go, oh, okay, wait. I know what I want to show you is I want to show you this right here, regex from API. And this is code that was originally developed by Oscar Martinez Valero, and I adapted it based on his work. And what he did is figured out basically from Power Query how you could call the OpenAI API. And so what it's doing here is it's going out to GPT-4, it's taking my API key, it's then saying, prompting it, you are an analytics expert, provide the requested regex with no introductory or explanatory text, just the regex code itself. And then it's pulling the regex from that parameter that I entered, pushing it out to the AI, and then bringing it back. And then as it brings it back, what it does is it adds that column here in regex. And so what it does is it goes out to, takes our source code, takes our regex request, goes out to the API, and then brings back this regex pattern. And then it runs the R script. And if we jump in here, what we can see is this R script calls a package called stringer, which is just a really versatile package that R has for dealing with strings and character strings. It loads the data set that we talked about before into a data frame, which is just R's word for a table. It takes the max of that regex column. So basically all it's doing is it's passing that regex pattern to R. And then it's just taking and applying that regex pattern to our data set. So the main column of our data set, which was that source data, and it's cleaning it based on that pattern and then providing the result. And so then what it does is it then takes that result and returns that to Power Query with this clean column, which was created through the stringer package. And so that hopefully kind of gives you a clear sense of what you can do in terms of building in functionality dynamically, through automatically through the API, or directly kind of through parameters in the Power Query, and then have it apply functions that don't exist within Power Query or Power BI or Excel itself. And so, when I talk about divide and assign, basically what you want to do in your pseudocode is you kind of map out a kind of a line of sight from the problem statement to the solution, is kind of break things down into chunks, and then in those chunks say, okay, which of those things are done well by Power Query and which are done well by other things, whether it's ChatGPT or Python or R, and then farm those out kind of to the places that do those things the best, and then bring them back in, kind of unify them together in Power Query, and then provide your result. And so to me, that is just an incredibly powerful paradigm, in the sense that you can take your data in Power Query and you can do complex forecasting, you can do machine learning, you can do all sorts of fuzzy logic data cleaning. You're really unlimited. As 21,000 packages can do anything imaginable. And then Python kind of adds even more, in the sense of there was one the other day that I used to do a pixel by pixel scan of a screenshot, and then feed the results back into Power Query. And so that data set call kind of opens the door to kind of doing magic. And so what I wanted to do in terms of kind of showing you another resource that that kind of piggybacks on that beautifully is, I call it Engage the Kaiju. And these are basically kind of five monsters I've built that kind of add on to ChatGPT. And what they are is they're custom GPTs. And I don't know the extent to which you've played with the custom GPT builder capability, or even just the GPT store in ChatGPT, but it is remarkable that there are three ways you can really improve an AI. You can improve an AI by improving the base model, and that's something probably none of us are ever going to do. In terms of, OpenAI, I know, has spent, I think, $1.3 billion training GPT-5 to date. So, unless you have a lot more cash laying around than I do, you're probably not going to be retraining these models. But the one thing you can do is you can add to their knowledge base. And the interesting thing is, each of us has expertise in our domains that ChatGPT does not have. And, for me, a lot of it comes from, I have a really excellent data book collection. And what I can do is I can feed those books into ChatGPT, and that then becomes specialized information that it doesn't have. And so let me show you. So basically what I've done is, I'll jump back here to show you. So I've got a lot of open. Okay, so if we go here and just close and apply for a minute. Yeah, so what this will do is, if I go here, this will show you that what I've got is, I've got 5 custom GPTs that I built with specialized knowledge, and most of that is book knowledge. So, Power BI, DAX, regex, Power Query and M, and then R, statistics, machine learning. And each of these kind of is their own their own knowledge base. And the one thing I haven't done is I would love to put these up publicly, but they're not secure in the sense that people can extract the information in them. And so, given my respect for book authors and for intellectual property, I've not wanted to make these public, but I can show you how to do it. And that basically if you go in to ChatGPT, and let's take the regex one, which is I think one of the best performing ones I've got, and you edit this, what this shows is it's basically kind of a fill in the blanks exercise, that you've got a name, you've got a description, you've got a whole set of instructions here. And these are pretty simple. It says you're a world-class expert in all aspects of creating, interpreting, debugging, and explaining regex. You assume the regex you're going to be writing will be used in R in the stringer package. And then it kind of goes through some things about how much detail I want, what are some of the websites to look at if you don't find the answer in the knowledge base. And then what I've got the knowledge base, which is eight sources, books, publications, cheat sheets, and other things that I think are specialized information that is above and beyond what ChatGPT has. And the thing is, this has proven remarkable in that I've been using this for about a month and a half. It is yet to miss a single question in a month and a half. And so, by kind of filling your custom GPTs with whatever domain knowledge you've got that's probably above and beyond what ChatGPT would have been able to pull off the public internet, you can really increase the power of this. And so that is something that I wanted to highlight. The other thing is, for those who are using Claude has a similar thing called projects. And that is another way to feed specialized knowledge into the GPT to make it more accurate and more powerful in terms of the specific thing you want it to do. And I just want to show you real briefly. I know we're already running short on time, but I wanted to show an analysis I did not too long ago. Yeah. So this is my this is Obsidian. This is where I track all my content. And one of the things that I wanted to show here was just in this analysis that I did, and I posted this about a month ago, which is how good is ChatGPT 4 at writing M code. And what I did is I went through and did a very comprehensive analysis of all the problems I'd previously fed into ChatGPT using other prior OpenAI models. And what I found is that it really didn't used to write very good M code. That of the 5 problems that I fed it before, it got none of them right. Whereas GPT-4, of the 5 problems I fed it, it scored a maximum. There was a 10-point maximum if you got everything, the code perfect on the first try. And some of them required a little bit of reprompting, but what you'll see here is it scored 94%. It got 5 quite difficult problems that I would say most analysts would have a difficult time solving in M. It got all 5 of them right. And this, I think, is not even nearly the peak of what these models are going to be able to do. So, learning how to use and kind of maximize the capabilities of these for Power Query, I think is going to be an incredibly important skill. And so the last thing I wanted to highlight was, this look inside the machine. And this is a tip that Melissa DeCorte showed me, and it is probably the single most valuable tip I've ever learned about Power Query and M code. And let me show you. Let me just find the right. Okay, so we need to go back into transform. And this is going to be that problem that we looked at before. Christmas problem from July 14th. And there's two ways of writing a query in Power Query. This is one of them. And let me blow this up a little bit. And what this is a very standard structure. This is the way you're going to see most of your queries written, which is a let statement, and then a final step, and then an in statement, and then kind of calling that final statement. And this is for those of you who are more familiar with DAX. This is basically like a variable declaration. So this is declaring all your variables and then saying return result. So if you use that structure in DAX, this is kind of the same thing. And what this interior let here is, this is kind of in a sense, kind of a subroutine, that it's a localized set of variables that calculates a particular calculation and then returns that calculation back out to the main query. And the thing about this that's nice is it lets you kind of segment kind of complex calculations that you don't need for the rest of the query. The problem with it is that you only see it as a single step. So if we go here, even though this add restructure is multiple steps, you can't see them. All you see is the result of it. Now, the thing Melissa showed me, and this look inside the machine, is there's another way to write this interior let statement. And it's basically the equivalent of a record. And so in Power Query, if we look at this, you can rewrite that let statement as just a record. And then what happens is each variable, each step within that interior let statement becomes an addressable record within that record statement. And so if we take out this final call, the kind of the return of the particular record, here's what we'll get, is we will now get, instead of getting a result here in the answer column, we'll get a record. And we can drill down into that record, and we can actually look at the individual steps. And this is incredibly valuable for being able to go through and kind of seeing how your query is working, and particularly if it's not working. And the nice thing about this is if you break a step in the traditional let statement, it's just going to return an error. It's going to say, I tried calculating that complex variable you gave me and it didn't work. It returned an error. Sorry, I can't return a value for you. And you don't have any information about what happened. Whereas in the record, what it'll do is it'll go up and it'll still return a record. Even if every one of the steps in that record, if we look here, so here are kind of the sub steps within that record. Even if every one of these is wrong, and we've got flaws in the code, we've got logical errors, it will still return a valid record. Inside that valid record, it will then show you error, 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 error. But in most cases, your early steps will typically work well. And then you'll find like C does not do what you think it's going to do. And what you can do is you can drill down into the step, and then you can take a look at exactly what's going on in C. And you can drill down even further and take a look at that particular list. So you can see right here exactly what that's doing down to the lowest level of granularity. And I don't know in kind of a quick presentation if the magnitude of that is going to register, but that now gives you kind of an unbelievable level of control in your debugging, in your in your coding to kind of build really, really complex queries step by step, piece by piece, and to see the results of each piece before you then go forward and say, okay, that variable is working. Let me return the final step in it. So that's part of look inside the machine. The other part of look inside the machine is with regard to R or Python. And the way that works is if we think about let's go back to that regex one I showed you. And so if we transform here, we go back to this, that what we can do is we can now take from from right before we call the R script, what we can do is we can now take and copy this and go to ChatGPT, and let's go to our M code monster, and that is Mothra, and then we can say, okay, now we want you to do is put this data into an R data frame. We can paste that. Now watch what it'll do. It's going to think for a little bit, and then it's going to give us R code, which we can then take and we can paste into our IDE, which is our studio. And this is, again, kind of a way to look inside the machine. And let's create a new file here. Let's create a new R script, and we can now paste that in. And if we select this and run it, now this is exactly the point at which Power BI is starting from when it calls the R script. That we've replicated exactly what's going on within Power BI in R. And now the great thing about that is we can go back and here we go to regex. And now if we would oftentimes, this is not a good place right here in this box to be basically figuring out your code, that it doesn't give you a chance to run your code. It's a terrible place to program. But what you can do is if you can replicate that prior step in our studio or in your Python notebook, that what you can do is then paste this in, and you can say, okay, df gets data. So we're taking and we're feeding this into df, and now we're running basically the exact same thing that we ran in R. And there we go. That we've tested our code. We can expand this code. We can debug it. We can do all kinds of things. We can plot it out. So if we had a histogram plot, we could show that. We can look at our variables. We can do anything we want in terms of looking deep into that code. And then when we're done, all we have to do is we just take this, copy it, and just copy it right into the box. Here we go. Copy right into this box, and all we have to do then is take and feed that data set command from the last step into our data frame, and we're ready to go. So at this point, I had planned kind of a whole example I was going to walk through, but I'm already at time, and so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I want to give a little bit of time for questions. So I know that is a whole lot in a short amount of time, but I'm hoping that that has kind of given everybody a sense of the possibilities that are available for you in Power Query. You know, pulling in um, you know, M code, pulling in R, pulling in Python, pulling in AI, that it really gives you kind of an unlimited sense of power and possibility. And so that's really what I want to introduce you to. As I say, if you're really interested in this book by Luca Zavarella, I cannot recommend highly enough. I have learned more from this book than probably any book on my shelf, and it's really changed the way I use Power Query. So at this point, I want to kind of give everybody a pause and give you a chance to ask questions. I hope that's been helpful to you. As I say, I know it's
Yeah,
kind of a lot coming at you quick, but my sense is, don't worry so much about the details, but kind of capture kind of the gestalt of this in terms of the possibilities that this opens up. And if you're interested in this, I've got a whole range of posts I've done. You can certainly message me. You can tell I love talking about this. It's probably my favorite, tool and topic in data. And so with that, I'll kind of turn it back and, hope that's been helpful, and welcome to take your questions and comments at this point.
uh, that is too much to take in, even for myself. I think I'll have to rewatch the recording again and again. Let's go first of all to the questions that were already in the chat. Jose is asking, this all integration in Power BI, does it work in data flows?
I will check that. I know it does within Fabric. That in the Gen 2 data flows within Fabric, I'm almost positive it does. But I can confirm that. But I have talked about that with Luca and with Art, and I can go back and if you message me after this, I will definitely pull up my information on that and send it to you.
Okay. He also, I think it's the same, Jose was asking about whether you solve challenges with AI to test the solution code. He's also asking about auxiliary tables. Do you use R script for auxiliary tables? Can you use R script?
I'm sorry, R script for what?
I didn't get it. So, Jose, if you are still on, if you can unmute yourself and ask.
Hi. Really thanks for the presentation, Brian. These open minds, no? That's those questions was previous after previous your other presentation that you answer this when you show to us this and what I was trying or developing to create a GTPs. How you train these GTPs? You upload your books. You scrap some web page. I read you can train for 10 PDF or to GTPs to train or to learn.
Yeah, I don't think it's now limited in terms of the number of I've got some that I know are bigger than 10 documents. I think there's basically a size limit that I think it's about 500 megs. that I have actually hit the limit. That I was originally kind of planning to do one gigantic GPT, and I quickly overran the size limit on that one. And so what I did is I broke them down into separate ones, but you can call multiple GPTs within a single command. And so what I'll sometimes say is, okay, use this GPT as you write the R script, and then use this GPT to write the regex that you use in the R script. And so by doing that, you can kind of get around the size limit.
Okay. Okay. And why don't you create this GPT to agents of Copilot?
You know, I don't have. I mean, there's two reasons. One of which is I don't have access to the full range of Copilot capabilities because I'm not on an enterprise installation of Power BI. The other thing is that Microsoft made what I think is just a bizarre decision in the last month to discontinue support for custom GPTs within Copilot. And I don't understand that at all, because that is, I think, the main advantage of, you know, a service like ChatGPT or Claude, which is the ability to customize it to your domain expertise. And for Copilot to take that away, I just don't understand it.
Yes, yes, yes. I trying to create this agent, but in Copilot Pro in July, as you mentioned, there's not will be available. No? Only with Microsoft 365 you can create these agents, but only in enterprise solutions.
Right.
So
Right. And even I've even heard I think somebody mentioned to me that even within the enterprise now, there's the possibility that may get discontinued. So, you know, I don't know why Microsoft is backing away from this customization, because if you look at everybody else, they're moving toward it. That, you know, while Claude 3.5 doesn't have as big a capacity for knowledge, the one thing that's amazing about it is it's got a 50 meg capability, but it then reprompts that information in every query that you put in. So it never has this problem of getting deep into a discussion and not having the information within its token space. And so, you know, as I think as the input tokens get bigger and bigger, you know, that's gonna become a huge advantage for the programs that allow that customized knowledge base. And so, you know, the thing I've found is, you know, I've been doing a lot of testing, and my MCode GPT is, even though it has a ton of books in it, it's not complete enough in terms of actual code. What I'd love to do is I'd love to put the code from all the challenge responses into that GPT, because what I found with the custom GPT for M now is it sometimes knows, okay, I know that the solution that the base ChatGPT comes up with is not optimal. And so I know it should be moving in this direction of, let's say, an unpivot, but it doesn't know enough to execute that strategy fully. And so what you find is that it sticks in the mud and kind of spins for a while. And so it takes a fair amount of expertise in prompting to kind of get it out of the mud. But I think if we had enough code in that GPT, it would know enough to say, okay, this is the optimal strategy and here's how to execute it. But I think kind of backing away from that custom GPT approach, I think leaves a lot on the table.
oh, thank you, amazing.
Okay,
Any other
thank you,
questions?
Jose, for questions. Anyone else with questions? I think for me, my big take here is they're looking into machine. I thought of it like F9 in Excel. like you're doing an F9 and you want to see what every code is returning, and I thought that was nice. And also,
Yeah,
yeah,
that was just a game changer. From when Melissa showed me that, it was like kind of showing fire to the caveman. That all of a sudden my eyes opened and I was like, wow, I had no idea that was possible, and it just opened up kind of a whole new realm of
possibility.
exploration. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And also, telling it to the dark, I usually like to think aloud for me. So I think when I think aloud, I tell like, okay, these are the steps. This, but now I'll be writing them down instead of just thinking out aloud. I think I can write down the way you have stipulated there. That was nice. And then those steps using what you have showed, what Rick has done on his website, I think is also very nice. You can be able to learn those functions easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
That resource is just remarkable. That
yeah.
I would say bookmark. If you work in Power Query, make that one of your first bookmarks on your web browser, because that is just an incredible site, and he adds to and updates that every week. He's got
Mm,
more and more blog articles and reference pieces. And the other thing is that I'll mention is, for those of you who are deep into Power Query and he is wide open. If you've got a topic that you like to write about, I know Aditya on this call, he has written a couple of pieces for PowerQuery.how. He's expert M coder and has contributed a number of things. So if you've got kind of a particular area of expertise in M, I want to work with Rick on kind of that data set call and doing some stuff for PowerQuery.how and that. So, Crispo, I'm sure, you've got kind of tricks and tips that, would be great to have in there. And so, I would definitely encourage anybody who, feels they've got something to contribute in that area to reach out to Rick and, talk with him, because he's wide open to community contributions, making that site even stronger.
yeah. Anyone else with something to say? Aditya? I
I
think
have got
if this,
my next year mission. First, I will learn SQL this time, and the next year I will again reach out to our language. So something exciting happened with me. What happened was that I was learning M language since 2020, and really speaking, there was not enough materials, and like the online courses were like really BS. So what happened was कि I completely gave up on M language, and the reason behind was कि the structured data types are so much complicated, and specifically all those people are using lists, right? And so many curly brackets. I was getting so much confused. But later on, when I started learning R language, so by learning R language, I understood the concept of a list and records and metrics. Then things clicked. Wow, that was really in Power Query, and no one has taught us. So then I started learning M language, and it was so much simpler by learning just a few basic concepts of R language. So right now I am much more interested in learning SQL and finance, and then next year I will restart again R language, and I will contact Brian again, see how to learn R language.
yeah,
And it's a wonderful point, that one of the best things about, learning these languages, and for me, it's kind of the reverse, which is that I knew R, but learning M improved my R coding. It improved my knowledge of SQL. It definitely improved my DAX, dramatically, both in terms of kind of conceptualizing about it and also kind of having a way to push stuff closer to the source very easily. And so, that whichever order you learn it in, whether it's, M first and then R, or, Python and then M, they all kind of feed into each other, and you'll benefit that each one makes the other easier to learn.
yeah. I don't think if there's anyone else with a question or a comment. So thank you, Brian, for accepting the invitation and doing a very interesting presentation. I'm very sure it will be helpful to the community and people will watch and watch as many times as possible. So thank you, and I think we can end it here, or you can close with a comment or something.
Yeah, I just really wanted to thank you, Crispin, for having me, and it's an honor being here, and thank you to everybody for spending part of your Sunday here with me, and I hope it really just kind of provides some interesting food for thought. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And one of the things that I didn't get to do today is kind of work through. I have a problem that Omid had, is kind of one of his 4-star really complex problems, and I wanted to kind of show the methodology. And so what I'll do is I'll make a video of that, and I'll post that in my LinkedIn. And so for those of you today who kind of want to see it all kind of put together in one piece, I'll do that. And I'd hope to do it in real time today, but I'll do it by video. So again, thanks so much for joining. And
Also, the issue with LinkedIn is that, and that's why before you joined, I was talking about a YouTube channel. Is that videos tend to, unless you bookmark that article, it gets lost. So if you have like a
Yeah.
YouTube channel, maybe you can post it there. It's easier to get and to filter videos later on YouTube.
I will definitely do that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's it for me. Thank you all for attending, and let's continue learning and supporting the community.